DLC is a very important part of Borderlands. Some of the best weapons, characters, and missions come from the various DLCs within the franchise. Borderlands 3 is no different in that regard, with some of, if not the best DLCs in the history of Borderlands. But which Borderlands 3 DLC is best? Hey everyone, I'm Constant Canadian, and this is Which DLC is Best, Borderlands 3 Edition. Before we get into the video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe as it really helps out the channel. Starting off with my personal least favorite, DLC 5, Designer's Cut. Designer's Cut came with two major parts, the Arms Race game mode and an extra skill tree for each of the 4 characters. Now, I've been pretty public with my disliking of Arms Race. A game mode with no skill points, no builds, and no action skills just really has no place in Borderlands for me. It also doesn't help that despite many requests for additional maps, none were added, which left Arms Race feeling incredibly half-assed. The one thing I will say in favor of Arms Race is that Gearbox really got the balance right with its combat. And the new gear from this game mode is incredibly powerful, with the Plasma Coil, Torrent, Toboggan, and Infernal Wish being just a few of the awesome drops. But due to the nature of Arms Race, actually farming for this gear is a slog and a half. The other half of DLC 5 was the 4th skill trees for each Vault Hunter, and while this was a good thing all around for build diversity, and gave every character a lot of fun new skills to play around with, aside from Zane's purple tree, none of the 4th skill trees were much to write home about, really only having niche uses for very specific builds and interactions. Next up is the very first DLC for Borderlands 3, Moxxi's Heist of the Handsome Jackpot. Let me just start off by saying, while the writing and story for this DLC was actually incredibly good with unique characters, I am one of those people that just truly want the Handsome Jack story arc to end already. We've had 2 games with him as the main focus, and now with this DLC, 3 separate DLCs that are essentially continuations or retellings of Jack's storyline. So this already put DLC 1 in a bad spot. Now with that said, DLC 1 has some very interesting and fun side quests for you to enjoy, like helping a world-renowned jazz musician get back on his feet, or helping someone rig their sister's slot machine so customers will visit hers instead. It also has a whole bunch of super fun maps, each with its own personality, as well as crew challenges that actually give you a reason to explore those maps. The loot in DLC 1, while it was good at the time of launch, had the unfortunate displeasure of being the very first round of DLC loot released, so the other DLC's gear ended up overshadowing it by a long shot. As for the enemies you fight, they're pretty mid-tier, mostly just being reskinned versions of enemies we've already fought elsewhere in either Borderlands 2 or 3. The boss fights, however, are pretty good, certainly not S tier, but also not anything to sneeze at either. One of the biggest pluses for DLC 1 is the Scrap Trap XP farm, which is quite possibly the fastest way to level up in this whole game, but that's pretty much all I ever really come back to this DLC for nowadays. All in all, DLC 1 is pretty good, but it's just a whole lot of the same enemies, and despite the fact that our main antagonist is meant to be Pretty Boy, it really just feels like we're trying to stop Handsome Jack all over again. In 4th place is DLC 3, The Bounty of Blood. Bounty of Blood was Gearbox's attempt at a Western-themed DLC, set on the desert planet of Gehenna. This DLC is also the only DLC in all of Borderlands 3 that doesn't feature any characters from the vanilla game, which makes it feel like its own thing, unlike other DLCs which are more so big side quests for other characters. However, while Gearbox really nailed the whole Western but in a Borderlands theme, it may have been to their detriment, as the story actually kind of falls flat. A lot of the things that happen in this DLC story are obvious way before they actually happen, and it ends up feeling incredibly cliche. This story could have been vastly improved if they found a way to put Wainwright into the DLC as a sort of redemption arc for what the company had done in the past. That would have actually given us a motive to do this DLC, aside from money. The side missions in Bounty of Blood are also pretty mid, with no particular one even standing out to me, aside from the Legend of McSmugger, which is basically just walk up a mountain but with a few enemies. The maps were pretty expansive and fun, albeit a little disorienting at times, with lots of crew challenges to keep us busy. The weapons in this DLC were actually incredibly powerful, with the Light Show, Flipper, and On-Camped Herald still being top tier weapons to this day. But for some odd reason this DLC had no new shields and no new class mods, which sucks because some cowboy themed class mods would have been amazing in this game. The new enemies were interesting to say the least, but some were pretty obnoxious after the first few encounters. As for the boss fights, they were also pretty mid. with the final boss giving off some very Handsome Jack and the Warrior fight vibes. As for the narrator, while he was an interesting concept, he just seems out of place for this game, and I spent the whole DLC hoping he would be revealed to actually be a character in the DLC, but he never was. The Bounty of Blood certainly wasn't a masterpiece, but it also wasn't a piece of crap. If I had to use one word to describe Bounty of Blood, that word would be mid. At third place is DLC 2, Guns, Love, and Tentacles, a Lovecraftian themed DLC featuring everyone's favorite gay Borderlands 3 couple, Wainwright Jacobs and Alistair Hammerlock. DLC 2's story really knocks home that feeling and sensation of a Cthulhu-esque horror, with every citizen being uniquely cursed in their own way, very amusingly I might add. The story follows a previous fan favorite, Gage, to the not-so-well-known planet of Xylorgos, where we uncover cult secrets that have been lurking for years under Cursehaven, a town built on top of an ancient alien monster, all while trying to prepare for Jacobs and Hammerlock's wedding. The story in this DLC is very engaging and always keeps you on the edge of your seat. This DLC also has one of the best side quests in the series, let alone the whole game, as well as a whole bunch of other side quests that are not only eerie, but also funny at times. Guns, Love, and Tentacles is also home to some of the better weapons and class mods in the game, like the Anarchy or Moses Sapper class mod. This DLC introduces all new enemies like the Wolvengar and the Bonded, which aren't too bad to fight but can get tedious at times. And it's the same story with the bosses as well. The Empowered Scholar is a unique fight that has some pretty irritating immunity phases, and the Empowered Gron is also a fun fight with significantly less irritating immunity phases. However, the worst boss by far is the final boss, which, without giving too much away, only takes damage in certain spots, but those spots break after a few hits, similar to Deciduous from Borderlands 2, but at least in this case the shots respawn. The maps in this DLC, like all the other DLCs, are very expansive and interesting, though there aren't really a lot of challenges to incentivize exploring them, as all we really get for completing them are cosmetics. However, the super fun, super eerie, super engaging story more than makes up for these shortcomings. If you're a fan of Lovecraftian horror, then this is the DLC for you. Up next at second place, the second best DLC in Borderlands 3, DLC 6 Director's Cut. The content that gave us Ava's Murder Mysteries and Hemovorus the Invincible. Let's just start off with Hemovorus. A standalone raid boss like this is something that Borderlands 3 was seriously missing. Sure, we have the Psycho Reaver and Ista the Invincible, but Hemovorus is the only true standalone raid boss in this game, and they drop some of the best loot in the game. As for Ava's Murder Mysteries, it is amazing. One of the better stories in this game, and does a really fantastic job, along with the behind the scenes content, at redeeming Ava and giving her the character growth that she so desperately needed. While there may not have been any side quests in this content, the actual main story is super engaging. This DLC is also home to some of the best gear in Borderlands 3, with the Free Radical, Revolter, Atlas Replay, Death's Blessings, and the Guardian Angel and Bird of Prey from the included Vault card unlocks. There is only one real boss fight in Ava's Murder Mysteries section of this DLC, and it's not only super unique but also raid difficulty, making it a great challenge for any endgame builds to take down. There isn't a whole lot I can say about this DLC's story, as it's pretty much all spoilers, but it is super engaging and has incredible implications for the future of this franchise, and I strongly recommend this DLC to anyone who's played Borderlands 3. DLC 6 is also the DLC that introduced Vault cards, an interesting Battle Pass style thing for Borderlands 3, which has given us some of the better weapons and cosmetic items in the game. And finally, Borderlands 3's best DLC. DLC 4, Psycho Krieg and the Fantastic Fuster Cluck. This DLC has by far one of the best stories in all of Borderlands history. This DLC has 3 separate maps, all tackling different aspects of the second most mysterious character in the franchise, Krieg the Psycho. This DLC also has some of the most fun and interesting bosses, while simultaneously having some of the most frustrating bosses. And while the gear in DLC 4 isn't the best, the main questline is very well paced and takes itself seriously, while also being the over-the-top insanity that we as a community love from Borderlands. And the side quests, while being fairly short, are also super fun. The final boss of this DLC is also a raid level difficulty boss, with a very good loot room afterwards, with a secret loot room, which gives a crap load of loot. The 4 maps in DLC 4 are very well built, and each uniquely different, but while they do have challenges, they are by far the most annoying challenges in the game. This DLC is amazing, especially if you have previously played Krieg and are interested in his story. But even if you don't care about Krieg though, you could literally go into this DLC completely new to the Borderlands franchise and still end feeling something for Sane Krieg and his psychotic counterpart. However, the main meat, as it were, of this DLC is its story. So if you're really not into the storyline of Borderlands, then the previous DLC Director's Cut is probably your best option. As somebody who is into the story though, Psycho Krieg and the fantastic Fuster Clock is absolutely amazing. Anyway, that's gonna wrap up this video. Do you agree with my list? Let me know in the comments down below. Thank you all so much for watching and have a fantastic day.